So I'm so pleased that everyone's here today because we're going to be talking about something today which is so profoundly pertinent, not only from a kind of future technology innovation perspective, but really as a tipping point in the future of human evolution. Now, I don't say that lightly, but we are at the cusp of an AI-led paradigm change, which is completely going to transform the future of all digital content production, the entire digital ecosystem, and it's even going to have an effect on the way that we think and feel and perceive the world as humans. Now, this trend all starts in a relatively nascent field of artificial intelligence known as generative AI. And just out of curiosity, by show of hands, who's heard of the phrase in the room today? So pretty high number, I'd say about a third of you, which is to be expected because you're a very well-informed audience. But for those of you who haven't heard of generative AI, what it is really the astonishing, incredible, unprecedented ability of machines or artificial intelligence for the first time to autonomously generate or create any form of digital content. It can come in any format. AI can generate content in the form of images, text, video, and audio. So when I wrote my book, this field was just emerging. I wrote my book in 2020, and I made a prediction that by 2030, the end of the decade, 90% of video content would be generated by artificial intelligence. So 90% of video content online will be synthetic. Looking at the developments in this space, even in the last 3 months, I'm going to revise that figure and say that 90% of all digital content is going to be created by artificial intelligence by 2025. So you can begin to understand how seismic, how huge the impact of generative AI is going to be. And today, I'm so pleased to be able to introduce, to have a discussion about generative AI, somebody else who's been innovating in this field, somebody else who's had the foresight as to how this field will be developing over the past few years. Now, he's a very accomplished man, so I'm not going to go through his curriculum vitae point by point, because otherwise we'll be here for the rest of the week. So suffice to say, he is what can only be described as a serial entrepreneur. He's been building, scaling, IPOing companies in the AI space for the past 15 years. And today he is launching his first generative AI venture, and he's here to give you an exclusive preview of the company and what he thinks of this space going forward. So please welcome me in joining Dan Neely, the CEO and co-founder of Vermillio. So Dan, so great to have you here. I've kind of laid the context out a little, but perhaps you could start by telling us a little bit about how you came to generative AI.
Certainly. As you said, the last 15 years ago was the last time I launched a company. It was an artificial intelligence company called Networked Insights. And there we taught a machine how to think like a human, specifically in inferential meaning. So by that I mean, when my wife says to me, do we have any Diet Coke in the fridge? She doesn't care if we have Diet Coke in the fridge, she just wants me to go get her one. And so if we could figure that out, it'd be pretty valuable, and we did so. So then after that company had been acquired, spent some time thinking about the space, and I saw Jay-Z sing We Didn't Start the Fire. Obviously, Jay-Z never sang We Didn't Start the Fire. This happened because someone had taken a likeness to it as his voice and turned him into a synthetic version of himself. He asked for it to be taken down. It got taken down for one day and got put right back up. And it made me curious about what is the space that is happening and being developed, and specifically around all of this really interesting content out there that could be developed. So that was kind of the first moment I was like, this is pretty intriguing. We spent a number of years kind of figuring out some other things there. And then the other things that we saw were a massive explosion in the number of people interested in the space. Some things happened. Anytime the crypto world went down, we saw large amounts of people with really powerful rigs go into this space. We saw hundreds of people starting, this is 2-3 years ago, starting to create synthetic content, deepfakes at the time. And then more recently, we've seen hundreds of thousands of developers move in. If you go onto GitHub, move into this space. There's now hundreds of thousands of people using it. It's scaled faster than pretty much any other technology. If you look at GitHub and the repos there, it's scaled faster than that. So hugely intriguing to us, and we said, hey, this is a space we want to be in and we want to play a role in.
Absolutely right. I mean, just to reiterate on that point that Dan just made, I mean, this space has been exploding in terms of interest, research, companies launching. So perhaps that's the perfect seg then, Dan, to go into a little bit more detail about your latest venture, Vermillio. So what does Vermillio do, and why is it different from any of the other existing kind of generative AI ventures that are out there today?
Yeah, I mean, what we're doing is groundbreaking. The first thing, if you think about two trends that are kind of going on in the world, one is content is going to be created by machines, more of it than ever before, and it's going to far surpass all of the content that gets created. So that's going to happen, and we know that it's now easy for everybody to use. You know, up at even let's say 2019, there were very small amounts of this content being created. It was in 2019 there were roughly 18,000 pieces of synthetic content created. Last year there were about 3.5 billion pieces of content. This year there'll be about 9 billion pieces of content. They were talking about video and photo, and it will far surpass all content created but in the next 24 months. Just to give you a small example, there are 4 trillion images on Google today, on Google Images. This space will surpass that in the next 24 months. And so that gives you context around kind of what the things that are going on. So for us as a company, we said, okay, this is a really interesting space of anyone can create, anyone can build. And then this other piece which we said, if that's the case, we need to figure out a way to make this truly authentic. And this perfect technology that has existed for some time now could make that happen, and that was blockchain. And so the combination of these two things together, where I could understand ownership, who was created, what derivative was it from, putting those two things together was very, very valuable. And if we could put those things together, we could create some really cool and interesting things.
I mean, the thing that, just based on what you just said right now, the thing that's been so astonishing for all of us following this space is really the advent of these general generative models that have just really been advancing this year. Like Dan said, it used to be quite difficult to make a piece of synthetic content. The barrier to entry was pretty high. But this year you've seen the release of models where you simply put in a text prompt of what you want the AI to create, and then it can create it for you. So interesting, Dan. Then are you saying that with Vermillio, everybody should be able to own their own style and their own synthetic creations? Is that?
That is what we're saying. It also is a more profound statement, which is the words, I cannot sing, I cannot draw, I cannot paint, I cannot dance. Children shouldn't ever say those words ever again. Because in reality, that's what this technology allows you to do. I can become an amazing artist as a result of this, because I can describe what I want to happen, but I can't do it. And so a machine can help us do those things. And so all of a sudden, it unleashes a set of power to everyone, rather than just a very limited few. And so when I think about owning your style, there are generative models out there that are pretty generic today, and you don't have ownership of your style. But we all have a way of saying, hey, I really want it to look in this fashion. I want it to look this way. I'd love for everything that I experience to be something that is personalized to me. And so therefore, I should own my style. Why should I own my style? Because it's about me. Today, personalization, we heard some stuff yesterday. Today, personalization is very much about kind of generalized personalization. I go to a game and it allows me to customize my world, but it's customization in the context of whatever that gaming world is, a very closed kind of ecosystem. But what it should be is I as a person should get to define what I really value. How do I think about personalization? Well, today I want it to be a lighthearted way of thinking about the world. Tomorrow I want it to be, I feel in a dark place, and that's how I want it to be. But I should be able to own that style. And by the way, I should also let other people know I have that style and let them experience the same thing. So as you go down a path of, oh, I'm going to have interesting content created, it should be ultimately where we all have our own style engines. Those style engines shouldn't exist inside platforms. They should exist with us as individuals.
That's so interesting, because for those of you who've been following this space, some of the early controversy has been about the fact that these generative models can basically assume an artistic style and then produce content in that style, whether it's in the style of Dali. So you're saying that with Vermillio, you can actually own your own style. This isn't something, and this is the first company that's doing that, as I understand.
I mean, if you think about an artist, much of the kind of angst that artists have had, or major intellectual property holders, some of the most beloved intellectual property in the world, the problem that they've had has been, I'm not getting it. There's no attribution here. No one's telling me that I do, or I don't know where it came from. And so, if you have a way to own your style, really, really valuable. Right? That's the thing that I can now, and it's not valuable because I want to control it and own it. If you go and talk to an artist, they're not interested in controlling their art, right? They're interested in controlling what they create, but they have this fan base. And this very new thing happens when you give this context of ownership, which also, by the way, provides lineage and authenticity. I can now be in a place where I can actually engage with my fans. When my fans are out there, they're creating new things that I'd never thought of as an artist or as a creator. And now I have a direct relationship with them, which today you kind of have a relationship, but it's not direct. And so let's move into a place where we can put these things together, where ownership can actually exist.
So it's an entirely new concept, which is necessitated by the gravity of this technology. But perhaps you can show us, what do you mean? What kind of stylized output can Vermillio create? What can you do with the style engine?
Yeah, so today we not only launched the platform where we connect generative AI onto blockchain, but we also launched a series of styles, which you can all go and use and try out. We launched a series of things like we have one that's around horror, just to be aware, it's NC-17, so tread a little carefully. We have action figures, which I'll show you some stuff today. And the idea here is you're going to go down a path where you want to create. But I'm not an artist. How do I create something? So this is an example that was created by the machine, right? So this comes from 5 simple words. This is an original piece of art. It's an original piece of content. It's never been seen before. It's a piece of content that a machine created. And so to be able to do something like that, we have developed a style. That style is called action figures, which we've trained on a series of original art that we have. And so now I can start with simple prompts like warrior queen preparing for battle. Those 5 words taken by the machine and create a really cool, interesting piece of content. Now, ownership comes in here and lineage comes in here, because you may see that and say, hey, that's cool. I want to create an entire world of those types of people. Well, you should be allowed to do so if we've said, yeah, that's okay. And then we should know where it comes from. We should know that it connects back to an original. So you get to see things like this, which is a series of action figures. Again, every piece here is an original piece of art. It's an original creation. It's something that is in our style. We have an action figure style. And it can go to the next space. And as we think about the world, you'll probably recognize some of these people as far as tech CEOs go, right? And so another place it can go. So you start thinking about, people want to start seeing this place. Generative AI content is already taking off exponentially.
Yeah.
And so as you think about this is how we think about some interesting things. So there's action figures. We also, we're big fans of vintage comics at Vermillio. And so again, each piece of art is created in a fashion. But again, it's about ownership, about personalization. You can now take this and go somewhere else with it, but we always need to know where it originated from. Because if we don't, we're going to be in a place where there's an influx of we don't know where fake is versus real.
That is such an important point. I mean, before I became an author and researcher in this space, my background was in geopolitics. I used to advise global leaders on election interference, disinformation, and information warfare. And the idea of existing in a digital ecosystem where we're inundated by synthetic content and we cannot distinguish between authentic or synthetic, or what you're saying, to be able to authenticate synthetic content would be an existential risk for society. But just to go back to what you showed us here, because it's so mind-blowing, I really want the audience to understand that these are all entirely unique images, things that have never existed before, that were generated by Vermillio's machine just by a text prompt.
Yeah, text prompt, and we've applied a style, right? So in this case, it's a vintage comic.
And those styles are unique to Vermillio, and the outputs are better because you've trained the generative model on your own structured data set, so you can have so the outputs are far better than anything else you could create with any other generative model out there because you have these unique styles.
That's correct.
And you launched today with how many styles?
We had 11 styles that we launched with. Some of them are locked, some of them are VIP. We have a cool one that's sneakers that we hope to make available to everyone because we think about a world around digital goods. So another compelling stat that we found super interesting as we decided to launch this company was last year there was $37 billion spent on digital goods. I know many of my friends' children, my children, they ask for their allowance in Robux. And so as they think about that, it's like, okay, that's where the world is going. That number is supposed to, in the next 2 years, go to about $190 billion. That's roughly, to give it context, the entire retail apparel industry is about $350 billion. So it's growing exponentially where a digital good, a digital form of something, whether it be an image, whether it be a piece of clothing, whether it be a pair of sneakers, the digital version of it is something where people will go first rather than going second. And from a generational standpoint, if you talk to anyone that's under the age of 18, this is something that is very familiar to them, right? They know where this goes. So I now become my own factory for creation. I also become my own e-commerce engine because I have this unique style where I can create something that's unique to me, and by the way, I can give it to others or I could sell it to others. So the economic impacts are actually quite significant as we think about where that goes, but it also gives you why lineage becomes important because every derivative that someone creates of my work, I should be able to at least be compensated if I want to be.
So it's about being able to track kind of the synthetic derivatives of your own. So we've seen the style machines, and what you're saying is basically that anybody can have their own personal style machine.
Sure.
What do you imagine people might do with that? Because this is an entirely new world you're sketching out.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a little bit about goods. As far as people buying merchandise and so forth. They'll create community, really interesting community. They will create their own worlds. These tools, imagine, so now anyone can type in 5 words and get very unique content. That's going to shift and we're going to move into other places. It's going to happen in text, it's going to happen in voice, it's going to happen in video. I'm going to have a unique thing that I can do. But as you go down that path, what's going to happen is I can now create a world that's mine. And I can create a world that is something where you get to experience my world in some fashion, and it becomes unique to me. And so I think that's pretty interesting. So what happens is much of this is wrapped up in the creator economy, right? The creator economy today is estimated to be 50 million people, of which there are 2 million people that are quote unquote experts. They're experts because it's really hard to do. What happened with this is it no longer became hard to do. It moved to a place where anyone can create this. So we see a place where we move from millions of people to all 6.6 billion people that have smartphones can now create content that's high quality content, right? We're not talking about UGC from 15 years ago. We're talking about very premium level content that's being created. That creates a really unique and interesting world.
Wow, I just want to highlight that because that is just so profound. A creator economy today of 50 million people. And then what you're saying that because of the democratization of content creation, with generative AI, including on an interface like a smartphone, you're going to see a world where 6.6 billion people have the means to become sophisticated content producers on the level of something like what a very well-resourced actor can create today.
Yeah.
That is just astounding.
It no longer takes millions of dollars to do this stuff and months of time. If you look at the best deepfakes that happened over the last 2 years, the teams that are creating those will tell you it takes months and it takes lots of money to do so. We've now moved to a place where that's no longer the case.
That is astonishing. So just to go back to Vermillio's unique proposition then, because I know you've touched upon it, but I'd like to go over it again just because it's so unique and new. How do you prove that something's been created by AI?
Let's see if we can make the slides work here. Let's go back to Warrior, our Warrior Queen. For us, it's quite simple. So on our platform, you have a blockchain record. The top blockchain record is the person that created it. That's their blockchain record. It's unique. They can share it with people. The bottom blockchain record is its parent. So every derivative connects. So in the 100th derivative, there would be an entire lineage of where this came from and who created it and where it exists. Someone else decides to create something interesting, we can go back to it as well. So it's the combination of these two technologies that have been kind of rotating around each other that you bring them together in a fashion which, by the way, this is what blockchain was created for, right? A digital record, digital receipt of something existing and my ownership of it. Combining those two things together on our proprietary blockchain technology is how we think about it.
So just putting my kind of geopolitics hat on again, it's not only that this is so unique as a proposition to secure ownership that everyone can kind of share in the abundance of generative AI, but it strikes me as being existentially important for the development of the digital ecosystem, because as we've already covered, if there is no way to distinguish between the masses of synthetic content and authentic content, then the idea of what is a trustable medium, the kind of entire medium of digital content itself becomes fundamentally corrupted. So it strikes me that this is something that should be broadly adopted as a standard for synthetic content. Do you have any comments on that in terms of authenticating it?
Yeah, I mean, I think authenticity clearly matters, but the reason it matters is because if it's going to be mine and personally to me, I need to be able to take it anywhere. So what we do is we think about it powering interoperability, and not interoperability for the sake of being able to make technology work together, but because I as a person, if I have a style, if I own my own stuff, I want to take it wherever I can. And the only way we can do that is if other systems, other big platforms have a way to authenticate. You're bringing digital goods with you from this platform to this platform. I need a way to authenticate that it's actually yours. And if I don't have a way to do that, really, really hard. That's one point. The second point I would make is we have a very small window to do this. So what's going to happen here is major platforms that are ultimately closed, right? They think about, you can do things in my environment in a very small fashion, are going to remain closed. And so what they're going to do is they're going to try and control this. Then states are going to try and do the same thing, where they're like, you know what, if generative AI is going to exist, I'm going to control the engines that exist out there. So we have a small moment in time where an open approach is what's going to win here. An open approach where anyone can verify that I have ownership of this thing, where anyone can verify the lineage of it, because it should not be something that exists in a closed environment or a closed platform.
Yeah, because that's quite a dystopian vision where a few kind of nation states or tech companies own all the machines and we just become serfs to their kind of generative AI machines. So what you're saying is that everybody must be able to share in the abundance, because I think there's going to be phenomenal wealth creation, as well as new forms of creativity and expression, and that we have a small window to do that. And that's what Vermillio seeks to do.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
That's really exciting. Well, I know we're running out of time now, so perhaps you could just tell us a little bit more about what we can, you're launching today. What can we expect to see from Vermillio? How can people engage? And what
Sure. Before we go there, I have a little surprise or a little thing to share. So it's one of the things that we're going to do. So before I go there, we have a series of collaborations which I've shared with you, but we're not sharing publicly today. But with a series of artists, musicians, some of the most beloved IP in the world that are creating engines, and you'll see that come out over the subsequent months.
I have got the off-brief record, so I really recommend, if you want to try naggle that out of Dan, that you try corner him, because it's so exciting.
So we'll see some cool stuff. When I say the most beloved IP in the world, it's a cool thing. So we're excited about that from a collaboration standpoint. Then from a technology standpoint, you'll start seeing things from us which are, today we have image to image. We also launched, we haven't made it publicly available. I'll share that with you in a second. And then we're also this space is going to go to text to video, where we think about, you can put text in and ultimately you can see it, have a video created from it.
So right now it's creating unique images through text and images to images, and next year creating videos with text.
Yes, so that ultimately you can see some interesting things there, and I have some examples of that I can share with folks afterwards. But on the image to image side, let's go here. Hopefully you recognize these two people. So Nina, who has a wonderful photo of me that has a selfie. And so for us, it's like, I should be able to do whatever I want with these things, assuming I have permission, and turn them into something. So we took our action figures and our horror engine, and we decided to create something different from it. And so this is not something where I have to put myself into an engine. It's, again, every time it creates unique, and it creates what you want to be out there. So those are some of the things that we've been up to and will be up to in image to image. And then lastly, for any of you that want to come and check out what we're up to, you can certainly come to Vermillio, and we'd love feedback. The engines are available. You can create, you can share. We have a tattoo engine, so if you want to share with your friends that you have a tattoo, you're welcome to. But it'll be certainly interesting.
And if you want to have your own authentic style machine,
certainly you can come to us as well. We think everyone should have one, because that's where the world is going.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks.
Thank you for being with us here today.